Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a seriously high-stakes mystery that's unfolding right now out on the open water. Think about this. International commerce, massive military tension, and intense bureaucratic red tape all colliding in one of the world's absolute most critical oceans. We're going to unpack a theoretical toll booth in the Strait of Hormuz and explore this insane tug-of-war between physical maritime safety and devastating financial sanctions. I want to start off by posing this provocative question directly to you. What if you actually had to pay a toll just to move the world's oil? Imagine for a second that you're a captain, or maybe a shipping executive. You're navigating this absolutely vital waterway, carrying a cargo that the entire global economy literally depends on. And suddenly, you're slapped with a demand to pay a sudden, legally perilous fee just to guarantee that your crew and your vessel make it through safely. You're not just facing physical threats anymore. You're staring down a massive financial and legal ultimatum. Honestly, how would you even handle that?
Okay, let's dive into this because this exact scenario has recently become the center of a massive global debate. We've seen a huge surge of political rhetoric acting as a catalyst here. For example, former President Donald Trump has repeatedly brought up these so-called tolls in recent Truth Social posts, throwing heavy criticism at the conditions for transiting the Strait of Hormuz. And honestly, those posts, combined with widespread rumors of Iranian tolls for passing ships, have absolutely ignited public attention. Now, it's really important to note, the U.S. government hasn't officially validated that these specific charges are actually happening on the water. But you know how it goes, the rumors alone have been more than enough to send total shockwaves right through the maritime industry.
Which brings us to Section 1. Treasury draws a red line. Because the U.S. government? They aren't just sitting back to see how this plays out.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how it translates all that dense bureaucratic jargon into a totally clear, absolute ban. The U.S. Treasury stepped right in to flash a giant red light on this whole issue, practically overnight turning a geopolitical rumor into a concrete compliance nightmare. Their Office of Foreign Assets Control, or OFAC, dropped FAQ 1249. It explicitly warns that paying the government of Iran or the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, for any kind of safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz is strictly prohibited. Whether you pay directly or indirectly, it doesn't matter, it's absolutely not authorized. So with one piece of guidance, OFAC elevated this from water cooler speculation into a massive, very real compliance hurdle.
And if you're sitting there thinking, well, this is just an American headache, right? Think again. Look at exactly who this impacts. Yes, it hits U.S. citizens and U.S. financial institutions, plus foreign entities owned by Americans, but the net is cast way, way wider than that. Thanks to authorities like Executive Order 1392, non-U.S. ship owners, international banks, and foreign insurers are completely exposed to severe sanctions risk if they get tangled up in these transactions. The Treasury explicitly pointed out the risks of dealing with Iran's financial, petroleum, and petrochemical sectors. It's an incredibly sweeping net that exposes the entire global shipping ecosystem. Let's move to Section 2, the 20% choke point, and see how this builds. Because we really need to shift our focus from legal paperwork in Washington to the massive, real-world geographical scale of this problem. 1/5. Seriously, just let that sink in for a second. 1/5. That is the staggering fraction of the entire global oil supply that hangs in the balance of this single, incredibly fragile choke point. And this brilliantly illustrates exactly what we're talking about. Roughly 20% of the world's entire oil trade is forced to squeeze through this specific, newly legally complicated waterway. The Strait of Hormuz was already under a microscope after weeks of conflict-driven disruptions and intense security incidents. But now, add in these contested transit arrangements that have completely rattled ship owners and insurers. You've literally got 1/5 of the world's energy supply moving through a tiny bottleneck where the fundamental rules of passage are being heavily scrutinized and intensely debated. Moving right along to Section 3, Maritime Regulators Pushback. Because, as you might guess, the international shipping community isn't just taking this lying down.
Yeah, we're seeing fierce pushback directly from major maritime authorities who are stepping up to defend the established rules of the sea. Take Arsenio Dominguez, the Secretary General of the International Maritime Organization. At a UN Security Council session, he flat out stated that there is no legal basis for imposing payments or tolls on transit through Hormuz. He completely rejected any discriminatory conditions on passage through international straits. For the IMO, freedom of navigation under international law is 100% non-negotiable. You can't just set up a rogue toll booth in an international strait. It just doesn't work that way.
But while the IMO is hammering home the strict legal framework, We also have to look at the incredibly practical commercial side of things. BIMCO, which is one of the largest international shipping associations out there, issued a really stark industry warning. They pointed out that shipowners need actual security guarantees, not improvised mechanisms that condition passage. Because look, commercial confidence, that is the absolute lifeblood of global trade. And that confidence is definitely not going to return through ad hoc, politically conditioned transit arrangements, or let's be real, ransom payments. The industry requires actual cleared shipping lanes, not improvised tolls. Which brings our narrative right to its climax in Section 4, the shipowner's impossible dilemma. We really need to zoom in on the actual people steering these massive ships.
These operators are completely trapped right in the middle of a geopolitical tug-of-war. Just look at the cascading, real-world risks piling up on them at this exact moment. We're talking about skyrocketing war risk insurance premiums that make transit insanely expensive. On top of that, you have severe physical navigation threats from weeks of conflict. Then, you've got completely unpredictable commercial passage rules. And now, this devastating OFAC sanctions exposure. The new OFAC guidance is just the latest, absolutely heaviest weight dropped onto an already fragile maritime security picture. Sanctions exposure is literally sitting right alongside physical danger on the list of daily operational hazards.
So, the crucial point is really perfectly visualized right here. It's the ultimate trap. For these ship owners, the core question is no longer just, how do I avoid physical attacks and keep my crew safe? No. The question is now, how do I avoid having my commercial safety arrangements trigger global financial ruin? Think about it. If an operator pays a fee to ensure their ship isn't attacked, they might secure physical safety for the moment, but they simultaneously trigger devastating legal risk and sanctions exposure from the U.S. Treasury. Talk about being caught between a rock and a remarkably hard place, right? Which leaves us with this final, incredibly difficult thought to ponder. How on earth does the global shipping industry navigate a waterway where the actual cost of safety is international sanctions? It's an almost impossible reality for securing the world's energy supply chain. Seriously, if buying your own safety becomes a sanctionable offense, how do we keep the world moving?